Yeah. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Oregon Active Transportation Summit. I'm Cassie Wilson. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm the Community Engagement Assistant at the Street Trust. Welcome to Wheelchair Maintenance Work. I just realized the title on the slide in my script is different. It's cool. Wheelchair Maintenance Workshop put on by the Bike Farm and Oregon SCI. Obviously it's a very small group today, so I think it'll be pretty casual in terms of like asking questions and stuff, but you can always use the chat or the raise hand tool, both found at the bottom of your screen. And if you're posting on social media about the session, you can use the hashtag OATS2022 to post about the summit. And don't forget to visit the streettrust.org to learn more about our other programs and activities. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Allison.
Thanks, Cassie, and thanks to the Street Trust for having us today. Thank you, Ryan, Perrin, Cassie, all of you for joining our presentation. It's exciting to come speak with you about what we're doing. So this is the Wheelchair Maintenance Workshop. We're hosted by Bike Farm and Spinal Cord Injury Connection. And today we're going to talk largely about how community aid can help promote transportation and mobility independence. And we're going to use our workshop series as sort of an example, but it's also a jumping off point for how community aid can influence, can help, provide support where maybe the system doesn't fully cover the need. We can go to the next slide.
All right. Yeah, thank you, everyone. My name is Wes Livide. I use he, him pronouns, and I also identify as being disabled. I have a spinal cord injury. This slide is a brief overview of our presentation today. We're going to be, as I think Allison mentioned, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what we've done and the origins of this work and this partnership, and how out of this work there's been innovation and a lot of learning. So that's going to be the first three long arrows that you see there, the first 15 minutes. And then the last, actually 3/4 of our presentation, perhaps, is a discussion, really pointed questions about what does it mean to be in community and kind of be an ally to the disability community in order to create an environment that is accessible, inclusive, and active. So the third to last slide is mutual aid and unlikely alliances. Then we'll talk about repair, resilience, and resistance, and building trust, being vulnerable is the last discussion. All right, Tyler, do you mind going to the next slide? Today we're going to cover a few, our meeting goals are to provide information about who we are and how we got here. We're going to outline the challenges faced by wheelchair users needing maintenance and how active transportation advocates are positioned to help. And then we encourage all of you advocates for active transportation, whether you're a cyclist, a pedestrian, an urban planner, or a mayor, to think about partnering with your disability neighbors to create a more active and accessible Oregon. And if you're really intrigued, maybe even host a wheelchair maintenance workshop in your bike shop or your community. Next slide, Tyler. Thanks.
Cool. So a little bit about us, who we are, the organizations we represent. My name is Allison Persefield. I use she, her pronouns. I do not identify as disabled. I am a long-term volunteer at Bike Farm, and Bike Farm, for those of you who aren't familiar with the organization, we're an all volunteer run cooperative space, provides access to tools and parts with the goal of providing affordable access to independent transportation. The shop is mostly focused as a space where we work on bicycles. It's in the name, it's Bike Farm, where people can learn how to work on bikes independently or with the support of a mechanic. And we've expanded our support to also include wheelchairs in the past few years, and that's what we're here to talk about today. And so we've been gradually reopening our space the past 2 years, bringing back our standard offerings, and we're looking forward to resuming our wheelchair maintenance workshop series this summer. We did host a couple last summer across town, but we're going to be moving back into the Bike Farm space this year and looking to open that back up. And we're just as a note, we're located in inner Northeast at First and Schuyler, and this is our mission statement here. You can read through it here, or also just feel free to look us up online at Bike Farm PDX. And turn it over to West, who is representing Oregon SCI.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. So I'm the founder of Oregon Spinal Cord Injury Connection. I had a spinal cord injury 8 years ago. And after that experience, I discovered quickly there weren't many community-based resources or services or even connections for this community, and hence the birth of this organization. And our mission there is we promote health, build community, and create opportunity for people affected by spinal cord injury. Our goal is to ensure everyone who sustains a spinal cord injury has the care and the community they need to thrive. And so some of the programs that we offer include a adaptive camping program, a wheelchair maintenance workshop, which we're talking about today. We have support groups, meetups, and educational forums. And really the idea is out of really the crucible of, for many people, traumatic injury and paralysis, there is opportunity and possibility for a different kind of life. And that includes overcoming barriers that we experience. And we do that best in, interconnected kind of partnership. So that's what we're excited about to talking about today. All right, thanks. Thanks, Tyler. So just as a way of a brief introduction, and Tyler and Allison are going to get into this a bit more, but we are the program that Bike Farm and Oregon Spinal Cord Injury Connection has brought together. We've aligned our missions to become a wheelchair bicycle community-driven alliance, creating opportunities to support wheelchair users' independence through education, partnership, and direct service. And if, as you might tell, I'm kind of like reading this, but I would also include that it's not only about wheelchair user independence, but it's also about learning on the part of bicycle technicians that sometimes have the tools and the technical skill that help wheelchair users learn so it's kind of like a wheelchair user component of it and bicycle technician component to learn and work together. And so what the workshop does is it provides education and support to the end user, a wheelchair user, and to bicycle technicians through education, hands-on support to really maintain and sometimes repair their mobility devices. And then another very important component that we strive to do is bridge the gap between bike shops and wheelchair users by providing this education and access to transportation independence by helping people service their personal mobility devices. Great. Yeah, Tyler, I think that's it for that slide.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tyler. I use he or they pronouns. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about why this program needs to exist in the first place. And all the stuff that I'll be talking about here is all stuff that I came across through talking to people at Wheelchair Night and West connecting me with other people who have either worked in this industry in the past or have other experiences with disability. I am not disabled, but I spent a long time in the bike mechanic world. So that was kind of my angle in coming into this. So um, all of this was news to me. And I think it's really interesting. So I've gotten into some research rabbit holes figuring this stuff out. So when you have a wheelchair breakdown, whether that's something minor or something really major, you call a durable medical equipment provider, or DME. Um, they employ a wheelchair technician who's licensed and recognized by medical insurances. And that person is called an assistive technology professional, or ATP. But this process is notorious for really long wait times and really high costs. So a handful of major national DME companies bought up many of the local mom and pop DME stores that used to exist. And then those few big companies compete to underbid each other for service contracts that cover pretty large geographical regions. So the result of this is that they're always overstretched, understaffed, and it's this real race to the bottom where, if you call a company and say, hey, this is broken, can someone come take a look at it? It might be 2 months before they have an appointment. And then also, you don't really have any other options if that timeline, doesn't work for you, because there aren't that many companies that do this. So as an example, simple tasks like changing a flat tire or replacing some bearings might take a bike mechanic, a few hours. Parts and labor might be 25 to 150 bucks. But when you call an ATP, you're going to have to wait months for an appointment. And then the visit is going to cost you $500 to $3,500 on average. And I have a quote here from Grant Miller of the Curiosity Paradox, which is a local disability justice organization. And Grant says, I have had repair people show up unscheduled at my house when I was not around and then charge me for their labor anyway. They also charged me for equipment that I never requested. Technicians can be hit or miss, but are usually non-disabled. They ask people to set aside an entire day to wait for them, but then they only give 20 minutes notice before arriving. So, as with all things related to the American medical system, there's a lot of complexity that makes it even more difficult for mobility device users to get the help that they need when it comes to repairs. For example, insurance usually only covers repairs for devices or sometimes parts of devices that they consider medically necessary. And determinations about what is and is not medically necessary is something that requires pages and pages of forms and doctor approvals and a lot of labor to submit everything properly and check all these boxes on this form. For example, so sometimes insurance will cover a wheelchair itself, but say something like upgrading to lightweight wheels is not medically necessary. So then they won't cover repairs on the lightweight wheels. They would only cover repairs on the standard wheels that came with the wheelchair. And then there are people who aren't insured at all, and those people have to pay entirely out of pocket for devices and repairs. So many people buy things secondhand to bring the price of the things that they need down. But oftentimes secondhand things need repairs, whether it's, power chairs that need replaced batteries, or something that's been sitting for a long time. So all the rubber components are dry rotted and crumbly. And then yet another barrier between people and the devices that they need is that currently federal policy enforces poverty on the disability community. People receiving SSI benefits, that's what people often refer to as being on disability. They get checks each month that are below the federal poverty level for income. Currently, the average is about $600 a month. I think I fact checked that a couple months ago, and I don't think anything has changed since then. And then your personal assets are also subject to a cap of $2,000 or $3,000 for a couple. So for this reason, many disabled people get married to their partners, lest they suddenly be subject to this asset cap. So all of these things combined, all the way from like ATPs and not having, options, understaffed and overstretched durable medical equipment companies, long wait times, high price tags, and then you have all of this stuff about medical necessity, the complexity of insurance, qualifying expenses, and then this enforcement of poverty. There are just so many barriers in the way of people getting either the things that they need, or if they do have the things that they need, getting those things repaired and maintained in a timely, economically feasible fashion.
So given that we kind of understand the challenges faced and the barriers that people who use wheelchairs are exposed to, in the course of just living their lives and getting around, we wanted to provide an alternative in an effort to improve the timing and efficiency that people can get service to actually keep people moving around. I mean, when we talk about Bike Farm, we want people to be able to roll home at the end of the shift, and waiting 6 to 8 months to be able to go outside of your house is not realistic. And so, if you're looking for a way to get more familiar with how wheelchairs work, a great place to start is just with simple maintenance. Just like bikes, preventative maintenance goes really far. Simple things like cleaning and greasing improve the mobility experience of a wheelchair user, and it's a great entry point for people to just get more comfortable with taking things apart. Another thing to remember, though, is it's totally fine to leave some things to the professionals. We're not trying to circumvent ATPs with our event series. We don't want to create an adversarial relationship with them either. But we are hoping to take care of more of those simple maintenance tasks that can help reduce the frequency of serious ATP appointments and really empower people to take control of their own mobility and independence, rather than having to rely exclusively on someone else to provide that for them. One thing that's been really helpful in developing this event series is consulting with local professionals and bringing together a community. For example, we interviewed a person who did wheelchair seating work for many years, and we had someone else volunteer who maintains and repairs the equipment for Adaptive Sports Northwest. Inviting these people in is a great way to build the knowledge of the room and really learn together. Plus, if you get in over your head, there's a lot of professionals in the room to turn to who have great insights and experience. DIY is not a universal fit either. I want to mention that for sure. And everyone has different mobility considerations and physical restrictions. It's important for us to work collaboratively on all tasks and have open communication from, just the diagnosing of what is wrong with your wheelchair, what do you want fixed, and then the hands-on aspect of it. Everyone who has a spinal cord injury is different and has different physical limitations, different comfort levels as well. So we want to make sure that to address where comfort lies, where support is needed. And DIT, or do it together, is the practice that we follow to do that. Regardless of a person's physical ability or limitations, learning how maintenance is performed helps empower people to have that autonomy and independence. You can show someone else how to do the task if you've learned how to do it yourself, even if you don't have the physical ability or range of motion to make that happen on your own. And so often, ATPs will come in and just do the fix for you, and you're not really sure what's happening. You're not involved in the process. And so integrating people into that process and having them participate in the servicing, the educational component that we search for in this. And these are the same principles that we apply to bike mechanics. And our purpose is really just to equip people with the skills and tools to service their own wheeled mobility devices, whether that's bikes or wheelchairs. So from the outside, if we hadn't said all that we just said, you might think that our two groups are not very similar, bike farm and organ spinal cord injury connection. One of the greatest joys for me of running the series is just learning where there is overlap and there is similarity between our two groups. Listening to two people talk about the relative performance impacts of different size caster wheels is a lot like listening to someone tell me why should I have a 26-inch wheel over a 700C on my bike, or go for that in general. So there's a lot of crossover in that way. And as Tyler laid out, it's clear that there are some serious challenges and barriers in the way of getting a wheelchair repaired, but there are ways to break down those barriers and expand access to support wheelchair users. Bike shops and bike co-ops are uniquely positioned to help. Bike shops are more consistently spread out across a city and easier to access for most people than scheduling an appointment with an ATP. Their wait times are shorter, even in the summer months when we see those high wait times at bike shops, than the time it would take to set up an appointment. So establishing a connection between bike shops and wheelchair users builds a greater network of support for wheelchair users across the city. And this is why we invite bike mechanics to also participate in our series, to lend their knowledge and also to build their skills in a safe, collaborative learning environment. So there is quite a bit of overlap between wheelchairs and bicycles. For example, bike shops and even home toolkits already have most of the necessary tools that you would need to work on a wheelchair. Most commonly hex wrenches, but also hub wrenches, air compressors. These are all useful. Air compressors can be used to inflate tires or install grips. Spoke wrenches can be used to true wheels. For the most part, caster wheel bearings use skateboard size bearings. So, and also lots of wheelchairs use either 24 or 26-inch inner tubes. So there's crossover in skateboarding and bicycles as well. Many wheelchairs use metric fasteners as well, and those are the same size as like the M5 and the M6 bolts that we see just all over bicycles. We also have a similarity in knowledge components. Lots of the systems on wheelchairs are very similar to those when working on a bicycle. Adjusting bearings is similar to adjusting bike hubs. Truing wheels is the same for both. And adjusting brake levers or on rollators or walkers is the same as on bikes. We also rely on the same infrastructure, curb cuts, ramps, and accommodations on bikes, on buses for bikes and wheelchairs are both things that we share between the two groups. And, as I said, every time we meet, we learn of new parallels and similarities between each other. So every time we host one of these events, we learn something new about each other. So over the next 3 slides and through the conclusion of our presentation, we're going to lead the group through some guided discussion and then open it up to a question and answer for just general questions. Using Wheelchair Maintenance Workshop as sort of a case study on how our organizations were strengthened through mutual aid programming. We have questions posed on these slides that we would like to hear your answers on. You can feel free to unmute yourself and speak freely. And we really want to hear from you, from your personal experience, as well as any organizations that you may represent, and how you can expand your reach beyond the limited demographic scope. So for us, it was bikes. We are termed bike farm. Initially, we were just there to support bikes, but people started coming in with e-bikes. wheelchairs, all these other things, after we started the wheelchair maintenance workshop series. So we were viewed as a place that supported more people than just bike riders. So yeah, I want to open it up to hear from you guys and hear what you think. We have a couple questions here I'll walk us through. The first question is, who is not served by your organization or an organization you represent? And how do you think that your organizations can adapt to help support those groups as well? And I can start off with just an example from our experience. So in 2018, I was tabling at the Matt Dishman Community Center for Bike Farm, and that's just down the street from our co-op. Someone there was using a wheelchair, and they approached me and asked, what can your organization do for me? My response was pretty bad. I said something along the lines of that they could help fix bikes, they could provide admin support or volunteer coordination, sort of just whatever they wanted within our existing framework. And they replied to me in a gentle way, but critical, that was great, but it was not actually helpful to them. And then they stated that what they actually would find helpful is if we could provide a space and tools where that person could work on their own chair. And this person identified that their need matched what our exact services were providing, but that we were not set up to help them because it was a different mobility device than a bicycle. So as a bike cooperative, it was not clear that we could provide support beyond bikes. And it kind of instilled this idea in us that could be something that we would do. And we just had to figure out how. So in 2019, our partnership was born from this exact conference. I attended, Wes presented. Wes was presenting on behalf of Oregon SCI on accessible design at the zoo conference. I approached Wes after the presentation and asked if they would be interested in participating with Bike Farm in partnering an event to teach wheelchair maintenance. And Wes, mentioned that this was something that they had been interested in getting off the ground for a while now, but that they had never considered running it with a bike shop. But it was an intriguing idea, and several years later, here we are, and an alliance has been formed. So we found a way, tying it back to the question, we found a way to adapt our services to include people who needed them, but we were not serving to begin with. So have you found in your organizations or your work with your organizations in the past that your programming was not supporting of a certain group of people that needed your support, but was not able to get support? And then how did you modify your offerings to include them? Anyone can feel free to unmute themselves.
I can start. I don't know if this totally answers the question, but one project I've been working on since I started at Tool 2.5 years ago is the LA Bike Share. And I've been thinking a lot about how, I guess one of the main goals is equity and creating alternative transportation, but it really doesn't serve adaptive mobility as well as it could. I know there's a lot of programs that are more like one-off and events, sometimes during the summer, where people can rent different kind of cycles. But yeah, just hearing this talk, it kind of made me think about how I could be a better proponent of having more of those types of events, and especially thinking about wheelchair maintenance. Like, for instance, if someone's wheelchair was in disrepair, I feel like bike share could serve as maybe a temporary solution for getting around. If there was some kind of mobility device associated with it, maybe in terms of like a short-term rental instead of just, as we see bike share around the city, like with Bike Town, where it's kind of, just by the trip it could be kind of a replacement device, and then once they're able to get it fixed, maybe return it. But yeah, that was just an idea that popped into my mind as I was listening to the presentation. I think in general, I can definitely be a better proponent for having more access to adaptive mobility devices with bike share. And then just also in my work as a designer, civil engineer, just thinking about universal design a lot more. I think when you were talking about all the synergies you found, like working with people fixing wheelchairs and bikes, I think there isn't enough, or we can't have too little amounts of time working with people in both realms and trying to figure out what can serve people in wheelchairs really helps with all types of mobility. I think, yeah, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but one other thing that comes to mind is just bus stop design, just making sure that, especially in constrained situations, we're really putting the emphasis on access to the bus loading, because I've noticed taking the bus around town, sometimes there's like this awkward moment of kind of figuring out how the ramp is going to come down. And I feel like there could just be more transparency with that, and definitely just better fluidity with those interchanges. Yeah, I'll let someone else go.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. We can also ask, we have a couple other questions here too. For organizations that you work with, have you found that partnering with other organizations help inform your work and broaden your understanding beyond your limited scopes that your nonprofits or organizations sort of are tailored to? For us, Bike Farm focused on bikes. Oregon Spinal Cord Injury Connection focused on wheelchairs. So combining the two groups really helped combine our skill sets into one cohesive group with a lot of different knowledge from different parts of mobility space, and helped us better understand each other. As someone who's not disabled, I don't understand everything that is a part of being disabled, and being in a space where I can learn from other people's experiences has helped me understand, what needs and motivations people have. So yeah, does anyone want to talk about a partnership that they've allied with another group and how to inform their work?
I think for me, I haven't personally been involved with a nonprofit in my work yet, but I would say a lot of the planners at my company have done walk audits with all different types of groups to try to figure out for pedestrian planning, like what existing conditions are really big barriers. So I think that kind of activity is really critical for planning and design process.
Allison, if you don't mind, I'll jump in here as well.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, like when I think about being aligned with another organization like this partnership with BikeShare, the only way that, I wouldn't say the only way that we get work done is through partnership, but there's an element of truth to that. Another program that we have is what we call campability or adaptive camping. We serve as the trusted liaison with the disability community or the spinal cord injury community. And then we partner with Adventures Without Limits. And they are a outfitter that have a lot of experience in working with the disability community or underserved community to get into spaces in nature that are, that we don't have access to. And through that program, we host, like these 5 camping events in the summer. And for a lot of people with spinal cord injuries, it's the first time they've been camping since their injury, or maybe it's the first time they've ever been camping. And so I guess the reason I mentioned that is that as I think the lived experience of disability, you see barriers all the time. And when you see a word that says welcome, or everyone's included here, or the word all in program like propaganda or promotional materials, there's a voice in my head, and I've heard it from other people as well. It's like, yeah, not really. They don't really mean me, because they don't know that wheels don't go up steps, or they don't know, the things are different on this side. And so I think when Tyler and Alice and I were thinking about this presentation, it's not like a perfect fit into the active transportation symposium or summit. And we were thinking, like, what is it that we've done well from the last time that we were together that we want to share with you? And this is one of the deepest lessons that we've learned, which is in partnership, each of us has strengths and each of us has knowledge gaps. Together, something is emerging that we didn't even anticipate. And so instead of it being more of a transactional, like, oh, here's a problem, let's try to find the fix, it's more like, how do we get to know the people that need to get through this gap and really have an emergent experience. So I'll pause there.
Yep, and we can move forward to the next slide, but I do just want to cover, that our alliance is, really not a transactional one. It's an opportunity for everyone to learn and grow and expand our network and bridge communication gaps that have existed for a long time, cover a need. But we can keep moving and move on to the next slide.
Thanks, Allison. So this is the slide that I am kind of facilitating. And the title of the slide is Resilience and Resistance. And there's a little blurb here, and then there's some questions, but I also wanted to share what these words mean and what they mean to us and why we're having the conversation about this. So in the face of the durable medical equipment system, which Tyler alluded to, how complex and how many bureaucratic traps it feels like there are for a person to have not only an active lifestyle, but an active wheelchair, a wheelchair that works. Like for me, if I don't have a wheelchair that works, or that doesn't work well, it means shoulder pain, it means elbow pain, it means hands that are sore, it means a lot of things. And so when my wheelchair is running really smoothly, it feels good, and I feel better, not just like physically, but emotionally too. Like I can get out, I can go be with friends, and I'm much more inclined to be active. And so, resilience and resistance, we're talking about a system that doesn't work, or it works, as I think like Perrin might say, it's designed this way, so it's going to function the way it's designed. And it was designed by able-bodied people, well-intentioned, thinking that we could give solutions to fix problems, I guess. But for a wheelchair user, the unintended consequence of piecemeal American medical system means that it's not efficient, it's not streamlined, it's not affordable. There's not a lot of value that comes through in maintaining a wheelchair. What I mean by that, it's not to the durable medical equipment providers' interest to go out of their way to maintain a wheelchair, because it costs too much. All that does is it just further kind of systematically traumatizes, oppresses, marginalizes people with disabilities that are very capable of being active and engaged, and they want to. And so what do you do when you're faced with an overwhelming, like, or an insurmountable problem? Like, you just can't by yourself overcome this. In the face of a system that's designed against you, you have to resist and you have to be resilient. And for people with disabilities, they have to be resilient and they have to be resist. Otherwise, they will be crushed and they won't be moved. They won't be able to move in the example that we're talking about. They just won't be able to get out of their house. And I know dozens of people that are in this situation right now. There's another little interesting tidbit that Tyler alluded to that we didn't really talk about. But if I was on Medicaid and I had a ATP come to my home to fix something on my wheelchair, and he said, we can get you that part in 6 weeks. I was like, oh, don't worry about it. I'll just order it online for $24. He's like, no, you can't do that. Right? What? Why not? Well, because you're a Medicaid enrollee, you cannot use your own dollars to pay for an upgrade or a part for your chair. It has to be paid through Medicaid. So if I want to upgrade something on my wheelchair, if I was a Medicaid enrollee, can't do that. And if you do that, it's not covered. And so even in my own interest, if I wanted to save my own money or someone wanted to give me money to pay for something to upgrade on my wheelchair, I can't do that. I'm literally, use any kind of expletive you want, trapped in a wheelchair that doesn't work. And the professionals won't fix it. So resilience and resistance. And so in the face of all of this, you need partners. We need people that are willing to think outside the box and be like, recognize the wealth of human ingenuity and people that are just that want to be engaged. And so I'll end here, but basically I think our workshop and what we're trying to ask of people that are participating in this conference is, how do you use your gifts and talents to reach out across your scope to people that are marginalized, that are oppressed, that are forgotten. And in this example, it's people with disabilities. And we're asking you these two questions. What is a systems level problem that you might see from your perspective that in collaboration, in partnership with a community or a group, how could you resolve that? That's one question. And the other one is, how can we build community resilience to systems that affect mobility and transportation? And the short answer to that, but I don't know, but what comes to my mind is partnership. I feel better. I feel more committed. I feel more hopeful after the workshop night. And these two beautiful people, Allison and Tyler, are like, let's do it again. Let's do it. And we've helped somebody. I'm like, yeah, this is good work, even though it's a drop in the bucket. It's important. So that's my little ad lib. But what do you guys think about these two questions?
I think you're spot on with just the partnership aspect. I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully working on projects where I can interface directly with people that know firsthand what it's like to get around in mobility devices. Because without asking and having them being part of the project, you're not really going to know as someone who doesn't use one. I kind of think like sort of corollary, but definitely not quite the same thing, is just having lived in Virginia, in an area where there wasn't a lot of bike infrastructure a few years ago, and just trying to get around by bike, you feel kind of like you're losing just because the infrastructure is not there. So I think like incorporating just the adaptive mobility, going back to the principle of like universal design, everyone will win. People that bike and just walk around will win when you're building for wheelchairs. I guess in terms of resiliency, just going back to like the partnerships again, just really knowing your community And I think like, although you won't be able to totally simulate what it's like to be in a mobility device, like personally just taking the bus and kind of interfacing with a lot of people who use adaptive devices on the bus is just, it makes me realize so much more like how difficult it would be to just encounter a no curb ramp or something like that. And just how small things for someone who can walk is a huge thing for someone who cannot get over that barrier. So just realizing those things.
Thanks, Perrin.
I think something I'm thinking about is just like that everyone has a role to play, whether they realize it or not. Like, for example, this year I've been dealing with TriMet's Honored Citizen Pass program and the hurdles of getting on that. And it's like also intertwined with the SSI thing. Before I got the job with the Street Trust, I was relying on SSI. And so I would get paid in gift cards for a lot of things that I did because then theoretically the government doesn't know. And anyway, and so I like have gift cards that I'm not able to use on the TriMet app to reload my hop card because they just don't work. And so it's like, I know somebody who works at TriMet and he was like, oh, I work just, down the hallway from like the people who run that. Like, I'm going to talk to them and like figure out like how we can, fix the system. So it's just like realizing like that, like every individual, like, there's a role for everybody.
Thank you. Well, we're about, not to cut it short here, but we're about 10 minutes. We have one more slide. Tyler, do you want to?
Yeah, I can take it over from here. So our last slide and kind of like the last thing that when we were sitting around and thinking about like what we wanted to talk about, one of the things that came up was talking about trust and vulnerability, and how that kind of operates within the wheelchair night thing, and then how that also operates within like, what we all do for work or in our other kinds of engagements. So we've learned a lot about how to build trust with people. For example, a wheelchair or any other mobility device. We say wheelchair a lot, but there's many mobility devices that people can use. But no matter what it is, it's really an extension of that person's body. So when they come to you with an issue, and you take it away from them and start ripping parts off of it, and it's a really horrible experience for that person. And Allison talked a lot about this as well, just sort of like how important it is to roadmap something and say, hey, it looks like your armrest is loose. In order to do that, I'm going to have to kind of reach around here. Are you okay with me kind of moving into that space to access this bolt? And just like how that can like so quickly build trust. And we've also talked a little bit about leading with vulnerability, and the way that sort of like leading with expertise can be really off-putting in that same way, like saying like, oh, I've done this 100 times before, or like there's a set of standards, so I'm just going to apply the standards. Here you go. Like even if that's true, like even if you are an expert and you've done something 100 times before and it's worked all of those times, leading that way can be really off-putting to people. So yeah, we talked a little bit about like what it means to lead with vulnerability and to put in that work to not just get someone to trust you, although it does help to build trust, but the point of building trust is so that when you are engaged in problem solving, you're working with someone as a true partner. You're making decisions together, you're sharing your knowledge, letting that person share theirs, so that at the end of it, you're operating mutually. And so we were just kind of wondering in our last couple minutes here, what does it mean in your interactions, either in your job or whatever else, to lead with vulnerability, and also, not just should we, but how do you build trust when making alliances and growing sort of community-led efforts?
Yeah, I can try to answer the first question. I think leading with vulnerability is just sort of leaving your ego behind. And whether you have experience working on like a type of project or like maintenance on some kind of device before, yeah, just listening first, having a discussion about it, and then proceeding. I think that's really important. I think also along with trust is just like historically, a lot of marginalized groups have had experiences where they're so-called listened to, but then like it's just like checking a box. And so I think building trust is like truly listening, taking that in, and then like after a project is over, kind of going back and showing somebody like what had actually happened and where their input got used. I think that's really critical.
Yeah, I'll definitely plus one that listening to check a box kind of feeling. Like I've definitely been there, so many jobs I've had in the past where they survey employees about how do you feel about this? And it's like, well, you're not really asking for my input. You just want to say that you asked for input. And then also your point about making an effort to like show at the end of a project and say like, here's where your input was actually used. That's also huge. Yeah, those are really good points. With our last couple minutes, does anyone have any other just like general questions that any of us can answer or shed some more light on?
I was wondering, a lot of the pictures mainly show manual wheelchairs. Do you primarily work on manual wheelchairs at the wheelchair maintenance nights?
I can talk a little bit about this one. Yes, kind of. So actually part of the story that originally brought me to Wheelchair Night and meeting West and Allison was I was dealing with someone who had issues with the charging on a power wheelchair, and I quickly realized how difficult power wheelchair stuff is. Parts are less interchangeable with bicycles. They're just more complex in general. So it's been kind of like a long-term goal of mine to try to build my skills with power wheelchairs, but it is definitely something that is more, it's just more hidden by the companies that operate, or the companies that manufacture things don't release schematics and things like that. And the link that Wes just posted in the chat is a really good article about Colorado having some pending legislation to basically make companies, it's a right to repair bill that would make them do things like publish schematics on like how things work. Because oftentimes at the circuit board level, like you just can't tell what's going on unless you have some diagram. So the answer to your question is yes, mostly. We're definitely more comfortable working on manual chairs. Power chairs we can kind of work on, but sometimes you just kind of like hit a black box of like manufacturer technology. However, there's a couple people on YouTube who have some really cool channels where they like take apart and hack power chairs. So some people are figuring it out.
I just had one logistical question. I was wondering if someone who has a wheelchair that's in disrepair, how they get to the wheelchair workshop, if they live alone or something.
I can share a brief story. There's a photo of a guy here that we helped him in a new wheelchair, and they showed up in a collapsible manual wheelchair that they got from Goodwill. And but the the real question to your real answer to your question is that they don't, and so for that reason, Allison and Tyler and I decided to try to go to other bike shops to see if we could get closer to some people who had difficulty getting on public transportation. But there are multiple barriers that we've not like hacked this or figured it out, but it's a good point. There's some things we haven't figured out yet.
It's always going to be a barrier for people to get to us. We're Bike Farms by the Moda Center. Our event was typically on Thursdays, so it intersected with basketball games and parking. We are an ADA accessible space, so at least there's that. But we did, for the majority of the pandemic, go to different like we went to a quad living facility out on the east side and help people there. And so, it's either staying in Bike Farm or moving to try and meet people where they're at. But there's a lot of approaches that can be taken, and sort of expanding out the network is all part of addressing that central problem of access.
Thanks.
So I think we're at about time. I do just want to say thank you to everyone who participated today. Me, Wes, and Tyler are all available to connect with you individually after if you want to reach out to us. We're happy to talk about this, and if you're interested in getting involved too, we could always have more volunteer support and participation to get things off the ground. And Wes just dropped his email in the chat. I'll add mine too. And Tyler's got theirs in there as well. So thank you for attending today. Really appreciate your time and interest, and hope to see more events like this in different places around Portland.